introduce yourself to the jury.
Hello, I'm Officer Jerry McNulty.
What do you do for a living?
I'm a police officer with Lone Star County.
What are your duties as a police officer?
I patrol certain areas. Yeah.
What type of training do you have?
You know, basic police officer training.
How are you involved in this case?
Well, I was patrolling the area near the 7-Eleven and the bank and Bull Crab's bar on the night in question when I saw everything occur.
You mentioned this incident. What time did that happen?
It happened it was a little after 2, I think 2:11 a.m.
What road were you driving on?
North Frontage.
Did you do anything to document what you saw in that area?
Yes, I actually went to the scene and drew out a map of the area.
Would you recognize that map if I showed it to you?
Yes.
Showing opposing counsel Exhibit 2 for identification purposes. Permission to approach the witness with the same document?
You may.
Officer McNulty, what did I just hand you?
This is the map or the diagram that I drew out.
Does it fairly and accurately depict the scene as you saw it?
Yes.
Does anything appear to be altered in any way?
No.
Will this aid in your testimony about what you saw that night?
Yes, it would.
Your Honor, at this time, the state offers Exhibit 2 into evidence.
Any objection to State's Exhibit 2?
No objection, Your Honor.
Without objection, State's Exhibit 2 will be entered into evidence.
We ask for permission to publish an enlargement to the jury and have the witness step down and make use of that
Any
enlargement.
objection to that?
No, Your Honor, I would just ask that I be able to reposition myself in the court to see the demonstration.
Sure.
Officer McNulty, if you could come down here. One second, officer. Now, is this that same map that we were just looking at?
Yes, this is the same map.
And what county is this area in?
This is all in Lone Star County where I work.
What road were you driving on?
I was on North Frontage Road here.
What direction were you traveling?
I was traveling east.
Could you please draw an arrow to identify where you were traveling on that road?
Yes.
And that arrow is pointing east on
Yes.
North Frontage Road.
Yes, it is.
What could you see while you were on the road?
Well, as I was driving on North Frontage Road, obviously I could see the businesses that you see located up here, but I could also see these two vehicles.
Which vehicles are those?
This red truck and it was a gray station wagon SUV looking vehicle that I later determined was an Audi specifically.
What was the position of the Audi?
It was exactly as depicted here. It was facing the road, facing south.
And were the headlights on?
Yes, it was facing my direction and the headlights were on, the doors were open. I could see that as I was driving up.
What was the position of the red truck?
The red truck was positioned this way, facing east, blocked in by the Audi.
Based on what you could see, was the red truck able to leave the parking lot?
No, it was completely blocked in. There was no way of getting around.
Were you ever able to identify who owned these cars?
Yes, the red truck here was owned by William James and the Audi was owned by Pete Mitchell.
Could you please mark the Audi with Pete Mitchell's initials PM?
Yes.
And could you mark the red truck with William James's initials, WJ?
Yes.
After you saw the vehicles in this position, what did you do next?
Well, I saw the vehicles in this position and I was driving this way down North Frontage, but I turned in here into between the two parking lots.
Could you draw an arrow indicating the direction you pulled in?
Sure.
And that arrow is pointing north into the parking lot.
Yes, it is.
When you pulled into the parking lot, what could you see?
When I was pulling into the parking lot, I could immediately see two individuals on the ground wrestling.
Could you circle the area you saw them wrestling?
Yes. So about here.
After you saw them wrestling, what did you do next?
After I saw them wrestling, I continued pulling in, but this car was blocking the 7-Eleven parking lot, so I couldn't pull in and park there, so I just parked over here.
Did you get out of your vehicle?
Yes, I got out of the vehicle, walked straight over to the two individuals, and pulled them apart to get them to stop fighting.
condition was Willie James in when you pulled him apart?
Willie James was severely injured. He was covered in blood, he had scrapes and a huge gash about his eyes. I was already swollen, turning purple and blue.
After you saw these injuries on Willie, what did you do?
Well, I was pulling them apart, but immediately I could tell how injured he was. So I took him with me and told Pete Mitchell to stay put, but I took him over to the sidewalk over to the curb.
Could you draw an X identifying where you moved Willie to?
Yes, I took him about here.
Now, I see that there are two different Audis drawn on that map. Where was that Audi at the end of your investigation?
The alley was here initially, but it ended up over here.
Thank you. Please take your seat. Now, while you were on this scene, did you have any assistance?
I called for backup, but no one else ever arrived.
So how did that impact your investigation?
Well, the only way it really impacted the investigation was it made safety a first priority, as I could see there had been an altercation or a fight and how injured William James was.
Who did you speak with while you were at the scene?
While I was at the scene, a few people came up to me on their own to tell me what
Objection.
they saw.
Your Honor, hearsay.
Response?
We have not gone into any statements at this point, but we do intend, not with this question, but within the next couple of questions, to go into a couple of those statements. Once we go into those statements, we won't be using them for the truth of the matter asserted, but rather the effect upon the listener and our subsequent actions in our investigation.
Anything from the defense on that?
Nothing, Your Honor.
All right, I'll overrule that at this time. Feel free to re-object if you need to.
Who did you speak with at the scene?
I spoke with several people.
Did you ever speak with Kelly Bradshaw?
Yes, I did.
What did you learn from Ms. Bradshaw?
Well, she's one of the people that I came into contact with that night that was very eager to tell me their side of the story. She told me
Objection, Your Honor, hearsay.
Response?
Your Honor, with this statement, this is going to Rule 613. This is going to a prior inconsistent statement made by Kelly Bradshaw. We anticipate that she will be called to the
Sorry, Your Honor, if I may, I would ask that the jury be taken out at this time as counsel is going into a speaking objection.
Certainly. Jury is dismissed. You may proceed.
We intend that, or we believe that Kelly Bradshaw will be called as a witness later in today's case, as she is included on the witness list. I'm asking the witness about two specific statements that Ms. Bradshaw made to her. We anticipate that Ms. Bradshaw will deny these statements. We are using this witness as extrinsic evidence to show these prior inconsistent statements, as here in Lone Star we cannot call rebuttal witnesses.
What is your response?
Your Honor, under that rule, the witness first has to be confronted and have the ability to either affirm or deny that she did in fact make those statements. This witness hasn't testified yet and hasn't either said if she did or did not make those statements. Allowing the jury to hear what these potential responses are right now coming from a witness that is other than Kelly Bradshaw, Your Honor, is improper. If anything, if Your Honor, I understand that there are specific rules and regulations and restrictions based on the calling of rebuttal witnesses in this case. However, we would say that the most appropriate way to do this would be for counselor to question the witness outside of the presence of the jury, and then for that to be allowed to be read into the record later at the conclusion of the trial, after the witness has had the ability to confirm or deny what is being said. To allow the jury to hear it now, Your Honor, would be ringing the bell that we can't unring.
I agree with that. If you want to proffer the evidence outside the jury, let me know when you're done. We'll proceed, and then if it becomes necessary, we can read that testimony back at the end of the trial.
Yes, Your Honor, we're still outside the presence of the
Yes,
jury at
you
this
may
time.
proceed.
You were talking about some statements that Kelly Bradshaw made to you. Where did she say she was when she saw this incident take place?
She said she was in the Bull Crabs parking lot walking towards the 7-Eleven.
So did she say that she was outside of her vehicle when she first saw this incident?
Yes, she did.
What did she say she heard while she was outside of her vehicle?
She said that as she was walking towards the parking lot, she heard William James egging on Pete Mitchell.
Thank you. That concludes our proffer outside the presence of the jury. I ask that they be brought back in for the remainder
Okay.
of her
Do you have any intent to cross-examine on that with this witness?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, then we will end the proffer. The jury is back. You may proceed with your direct examination.
You mentioned that you spoke to some other individuals besides Kelly Bradshaw. What did you learn from those individuals?
I learned from those individuals that Pete Mitchell had used a flashlight to attack William James.
So after hearing that a flashlight was involved, how did you respond?
Well, I continued searching the scene, analyzing what I was seeing, and I found the flashlight.
What did you do when you found the flashlight?
Objection, Your Honor, to the mischaracterization of the flashlight. I believe that we haven't established a proper foundation as for this witness to be able to say that that was in fact the flashlight that was used. She can say she found a flashlight, but not the flashlight.
Sustained.
What did you do when you found a flashlight on the scene?
Well, I found a flashlight very close to the car owned by Pete Mitchell, and I picked it up and retrieved it as evidence since I had heard from several people that this was the flashlight used to attack and hit William James in the head.
And would you recognize that flashlight if I were to show it to you in court today?
Yes, I would.
Your Honor, I'm encouraging opposing counsel with what has been pre-marked as Exhibit 1 for identification purposes. Permission to approach the witness with the same document?
You may.
Officer McNulty, what did I just hand you?
This is the flashlight that I retrieved from the scene that night.
Does this photograph fairly and accurately depict that flashlight?
Yes, it does.
Does anything appear to be altered in any way?
No, it does not.
Your Honor, at this time, the state offers Exhibit 1 into evidence.
Any objection to State Exhibit 1?
There is an objection, Your Honor. We would ask that the jury be removed from the
Okay.
building.
Go ahead.
Your Honor, as the officer just testified, she stated that this was taken into evidence. We would then make a confrontation clause objection, Your Honor, at this time, as we don't know the proper chain of custody that should be established before this piece of evidence can come into trial. All we know is that this officer said she picked it up on the scene. There has been zero foundation laid as to what she did once she took it and placed it in her pocket. When she put it in evidence, who collected it, where it's been since then, Your Honor. Therefore, we would say that our client is being denied his Fifth Amendment right to confront witnesses in front of him.
What is your response to that?
Your Honor, pursuant to Stipulation 8, which I handed you, it's on the front page of that document, all confrontation clause objections have been raised in pretrial and have been overruled.
Appears to be the case.
Your Honor, although even with the waived confrontation clause, there's still no chain of custody, and if this witness wants to testify as to the chain of custody, that'd be fine. However, we would say that that foundation has not been laid to show that this is in fact authentically the flashlight that she collected at the scene.
Your Honor, we have laid that foundation. She stated that this is the flashlight that she picked up from the scene. She never stated that it fell into anyone else's hands. She is the only one who had this flashlight.
We'll go ahead and get that testimony out through her, and then we'll readdress entering it into evidence.
Yes, Your Honor. Where did you find this flashlight?
I found the flashlight on the ground right by the Audi station wagon owned by Pete Mitchell.
Where did you put the flashlight after that?
I picked the flashlight up and put it in a pocket on the side of my pants in order to keep it and make sure no one else used it against me as a weapon.
And where did you take the flashlight after that?
With me, it remained in my pocket until I got to the police station that night.
And was this photograph taken at the police station?
Yes, it was.
And was it taken of the flashlight that you took from that scene?
Yes, it was.
And Your Honor, at this time, we believe that we have laid that foundation to enter this into evidence.
I agree. I will enter State's Exhibit 1 into evidence at this time.
Yes, Your Honor, we'd ask that the jury be allowed back in the room.
Yes. They will be allowed back now, and State's Exhibit 1 has been entered into evidence.
Now, permission to publish this to the jury?
Yes.
If you could show the jury that flashlight and explain the size of it to the jury.
This is a Maglite, as many people would be familiar with. It's a fairly heavy-duty flashlight, and it's 30 inches in length.
And where did you find this flashlight?
On the ground in front of, or well, near Pete Mitchell's car.
Thank you. Now, I'd like to talk about some of the statements you received. Who did you focus on gathering statements from?
I focused on gathering statements from Kelly Bradshaw and Pete Mitchell.
When you saw Pete Mitchell, did you see any injuries on him?
No.
Did you see injuries on William James?
Most certainly. From the moment I spotted him getting out my car, I could tell that he was injured.
When you looked at Pete Mitchell, what did you notice about him?
When I looked at Pete Mitchell, I noticed that there was blood on the front of his hoodie and that there was blood on his shoes and some blood on his hands. But other than that, he seemed fine.
Do you see Pete Mitchell in the courtroom today?
Yes, I did.
And could you please identify Pete Mitchell by an article of clothing?
Pete Mitchell is the beautiful woman sitting over there with the white shirt on.
Let the record reflect that the witness has properly identified the defendant as Pete Mitchell.
Record will so reflect.
When you spoke with Pete Mitchell, did you give him an opportunity to tell you everything that happened?
Most certainly.
Did he never tell you about his legs being injured?
No.
Did he ever mention a car door hitting his legs?
No.
Did he exhibit any signs of injuries that you saw?
No, not at all. He was walking around just fine.
Did you see any cuts or scrapes on him?
None.
Was there anything to indicate that that blood was coming from any wounds on the defendant?
No.
Now, what did Pete Mitchell tell you? How did Pete Mitchell tell you he got to the scene that night?
Pete Mitchell told me that he had been to a party earlier and then ended up going to the 7-Eleven.
And who did he say was driving the vehicle?
He said that he wasn't driving the vehicle, but his statements were very conflicting that night.
And so what did you do after you noticed his statements were conflicting?
I asked him again repeatedly who was driving, because he said, no, I wasn't driving, a friend was driving. But then he indicated that he got in the car and he was pulling out of the parking lot as if he was driving. So I asked him to correct him and make sure, and he told me no, that he wasn't.
What did he say about his ability to fight?
He said that he indicated he was more than capable, and said that he was using his fists and elbows to fight William James.
How many times did he indicate that he hit Willie?
Several times. He admitted, like, I hit him, without a doubt. He said it repeatedly.
Did he ever mention that large mag light to you?
No, actually, I asked him. He said that he had hit William James and he'd used his fists and his elbows. And I said, well, what about the flashlight? He indicated he had no idea what flashlight I was talking about. So I asked him further. I was like, what about the flashlight? Do you own a flashlight? He said, no, I don't even own one. I don't know what you're talking about.
Just to clarify for the jury, where did you find that mag light on the scene?
Right by his car.
After your investigation, who did you ultimately charge?
After my investigation, I ultimately charged, well, all three people involved. There was William James and his buddy JT Sanborn. William James and Pete Mitchell were fighting that night, and JT Sanborn was there. He was involved in the altercation. So I charged them with fighting, disorderly conduct, and however, I charged Pete Mitchell with assault and battery.
Why didn't you charge JT Sanborn or Willie James with assault and battery?
They weren't using weapons.
After making these charges, where did you go?
After making these charges, I went to the hospital. William James had been put in an ambulance and taken to the hospital that night, so I went there to follow up, see how he was doing, and ask him a few questions as well.
Where was Willie James when you showed up?
He was actually getting a X-ray or a CT scan of some sort to make sure there weren't any brain injuries internally.
Did you do anything, or did you take photos of his injuries?
Yes, I did. When he came out of the X-ray and I got a chance to speak with him, I made sure to take photographs of the injuries.
Did you ever take photographs of the defendant's injuries?
There weren't any. There was no need.
Would you recognize the photos you took of Willie that night?
Yes, definitely. I can't forget that.
I'm approaching opposing counsel with what has been pre-marked as Exhibit 11B for identification purposes. Approaching the witness with the same document.
Okay.
Officer McNulty, what did I just hand you?
This is the photograph that I took of William James at the hospital that night.
Does it fairly and accurately depict his injuries from that night?
Yes, it does.
Does anything about that photo appear to be altered in any way?
No, not at all.
Your Honor, at this time, the state offers Exhibit 11B into evidence.
Any objection to State's Exhibit 11B?
There is an objection, Your Honor. We'd ask you to hear outside the presence of the jury.
Certainly.
Your Honor, this photo is extremely prejudicial. Under Rule 403, it should be excluded. The photo itself was taken later on in the night at the hospital as bruising had time to set in. It is bloody. It is graphic. The officers testified already as to the gruesome scene that she walked in upon. She talked about how she saw him covered in blood. She already graphically described the way that Mr. James looked, stating that his eye was swollen shut, that it was already turning purple. She's graphically described that, Your Honor. Further, Mr. James himself is going to testify, and we anticipate discuss his injuries as well. Therefore, any probative value that this photo might have is substantially outweighed by the threat of prejudice, Your Honor. Therefore, it should be excluded and not admitted at this time. And the only reason the state is entering it is to try to inflame the passions of the jury, and it serves no probative value.
What says the state?
Your Honor, this photograph is extremely probative as it depicts multiple wounds. An issue in debate in today's proceedings is whether or not Willie was hit multiple times with that flashlight. The only way for the jury to understand the extent of these injuries is to see this photograph to determine whether or not he was hit once or multiple times. That's extremely probative for the jury to understand.
Can't he just testify to that?
No, Your Honor, because that wouldn't give the same weight to the jury. Actually seeing a copy of this photo is the only way that the jury can evaluate for themselves the extent of the injuries. Also, one element of assault in the first degree is whether or not the injuries were serious in nature. This would aid the jury in understanding just how serious those injuries were.
I disagree. I think he can testify to it, she's testified to it. If you have a doctor that you want to call, they can certainly testify to it. So I'm going to exclude Exhibit 11B at this time.
No, I ask that the jury may re-enter for the...
Yes, jury is back.
Now, could you please explain to the jury what injuries you personally saw without showing that photograph to them?
Well, when I arrived on the scene, I saw a huge gash above the victim, William James's eye. I saw that his eye was unbelievably swollen. I've never seen anything like that. It was already turning purple and blue. There were profuse amounts of blood running from his head. There were also multiple other gashes around his head as well, very similar to the one above the eye, but smaller. He had a scrape on his cheek as well, significantly injured.
So, to clarify, was there more than one injury on his head that you saw?
Several injuries, yes, more than one.
Thank you. I have no further questions. Permission to approach and retrieve the exhibits that weren't entered,
You may.
and the ones that were entered, publish those to the jury.
Yes. Cross-examine?
Your Honor, we would just ask that the jury have a moment to review the exhibits that counsel just handed them.
Certainly.
And please score, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Officer McNulty, you stated that when you went to the hospital, that Mr. James was getting a CT scan to see if there were any internal brain injuries, right?
Yes, I believe it was a CT scan.
And throughout the course of your training and experience as an officer, you understand that there are several times where there can be internal injuries upon arriving to a fighting scene, correct?
Yes,
Okay, and you say that the reason you went to the hospital was to follow up with Mr. James, right?
yes.
You never followed up with Pete Mitchell to see if he had any internal injuries, did you?
I didn't need to. Pete Mitchell didn't have any injuries. The only significant amount of blood on his body that night was on the hoodie. When I asked him about the blood, significant injuries to Pete Mitchell.
No external injuries, correct, that you could see with your eyes?
No external injuries, and if he had any internal injuries that he knew of, he didn't tell me about them.
But Officer McNulty, you would agree with me that it's possible that someone doesn't know they have internal injuries, right?
I would agree it's possible that someone doesn't know that they have internal injuries, but an ambulance showed up, and if Pete Mitchell had needed or wanted to go to the hospital, he was more than free to do so. I'm not a doctor. I can't examine him that thoroughly.
You assisted Mr. James in getting into the ambulance, right, to make sure he went to the hospital?
He was clearly injured, so of course I assisted him.
But you didn't in any way try to assist Mr. Mitchell and question him about any internal injuries, correct?
I tried to assist him about injuries in general, and he didn't have any, and he didn't want to talk to me about them. He was very uncooperative in regards to his personal injuries. I tried. I can only do so much.
In fact, you said when you started talking with Mr. Mitchell, he had glassy eyes, right?
He did. He did have glassy eyes.
And that he was a little off balance. Am I right in saying that?
A little at first, but I mean, he was standing up, walking just fine.
So you thought that those were signs of him being intoxicated, right?
Yes, I did, because I smelled alcohol on his breath.
You didn't possibly think that it could have been from the fact that he was fighting with someone on the ground on concrete, right?
I did. That's why I asked him about the blood, and then he refused to go in any sort of depth about his own personal injuries.
You didn't ask him at all about any head injuries, right?
No.
You didn't at all ask him if he was exhibiting signs of concussion, correct?
No.
In fact, you only focused purely on Mr. Mitchell because he was the smaller man when you showed up and had the worst injuries, correct?
Well, Mr. James was slightly smaller in height than Mr. Mitchell, but Mr. James was actually kind of stockier and bigger in ways, more muscular.
You stated that you saw everything, right? I believe that's like the second thing you said on direct, that you were able to see everything, right?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to pull back up State's Exhibit 2. Can you see this, Officer McNulty?
Yes, I can. That's fine.
And you drew this blue arrow here, pointing
Yeah,
east.
I asked that I can reposition myself, I can't see past
Certainly.
council.
You drew this blue arrow, correct, to show that you were driving east on this road.
Yes, I did.
And as you were driving east past all of this, you didn't see anything, right?
I could see the vehicles.
From here, you could see the vehicles.
Yeah.
Okay. But you didn't see any sort of fighting or anything, right?
Not until I got slightly closer.
Okay, so nothing here, right?
Uh-uh.
And when you turned in here, that's when you said that you saw everything, right?
Yes.
However, they were already fighting at this time, right?
Yes.
So you didn't see whatever led up to that point, am I correct?
No, but I could already tell just by the peculiarity of the way the cars were positioned that I needed to turn in and check out the scene.
So it was a peculiar situation to you, right?
Yes.
So surely when you turned right here, you called for backup, didn't you?
I called for backup after I parked and saw that there was indeed a fight, broke up the altercation because I wanted to make sure everyone was safe, and the first chance I got to call for backup, I did.
So that's a no. You didn't call backup when you were in your car driving here, right?
I didn't need backup at that point, so I
Even
wouldn't
though you saw
call.
this peculiar situation and it was clearly something going wrong, you could handle it yourself, right?
Every situation you come upon is slightly peculiar. They're all unique in their own way.
Okay. So then when you got here, you could handle this yourself, right?
I could handle that myself. I would have liked to have had backup, but I was more than capable.
So you roped off the scene, right?
No, I didn't.
Oh, okay. And in fact, since you didn't rope off the scene, a piece of evidence actually got moved, right?
The vehicle was moved, maybe by a friend of the defendant, Pete Mitchell. Who knows?
In fact, that's the point. You have no idea who moved that car, right?
Safety first. When you get to a situation and backup will not arrive, safety becomes the main thing that you need to take care of. And considering the significant injuries to William James, safety was first.
So your idea of safety was just to separate the two men that were wrestling on the ground, right?
To separate the two of them, and the one that was clearly injured, covered in blood, I pulled him to the side.
And you said that there were a lot of people standing in this area, right?
Not a lot of people. There were people around. I wouldn't say it was a lot.
More than one?
There were maybe 5, 6 people at most.
So 5 or 6 people walking around this scene while you're over here on the sidewalk, right?
Mhm.
You had no idea if any of those people had weapons on them, right?
I've walked into a mob of people before and come out more than fine. This was nothing to me.
Oh, so you're the superhero officer, right?
I'm not a superhero. I'm
You have the ability,
experienced.
officer, you have the ability to walk into a scene and a mob and walk out completely fine with no injuries, right?
Because I had backup show up that time, and then this time I was still fine because it wasn't nearly as many people.
Okay.
I have 25 years of experience as a police officer. I did everything I could and everything I had to do that night to make sure everyone was as safe as I could.
Well, through that 25 years of experience, let's talk about what all you did. You heard from lots of people that the fight started here at the 7-Eleven, right?
I heard that Pete Mitchell hit William James with a flashlight.
But you had heard that there had been a previous altercation inside of the 7-Eleven, correct?
I don't remember.
So you don't remember all these people coming up to you and JT Sanborn specifically saying that he had seen this guy before in the 7-Eleven?
I don't remember.
Do you know if there are any cameras out here in the 7-Eleven?
No, there aren't any.
There aren't any cameras outside. What about inside?
Maybe.
Did you go inside?
No.
The 7-Eleven's open 24 hours a day, is it not?
No, the altercation did not occur inside of the 7-Eleven. It occurred outside of the 7-Eleven.
Officer McNulty, with your 25 years of experience, surely you understand that there could have been an eyewitness located inside of the 7-Eleven, right?
I had multiple eyewitnesses come up and speak to me.
Okay, tell us their names.
Kelly Bradshaw was one of them. Let's see, Sam James and Marcus White.
Okay, and you took statements from them as well, right?
No, I did not have the opportunity because backup never came and safety was the first priority.
you talked to people subsequently, right? In fact, Mr. James himself came to the police department to give a full statement later, did he not?
I took a statement from Mr. James. I believe I took a statement from Mr. James at the hospital that night.
And so you didn't think to get any contact information from all these people around, correct?
I got contact information from Kelly Bradshaw, the only one who would stick around long enough to get that information. The others wanted to tell me what they saw, but they didn't want to give a statement.
So as they were talking to you, they were specifically speaking to you, right?
Yes.
Okay, and they were telling you things, right?
Yes.
And you never asked them what their name was.
I don't recall at this point. I mean, I recall them saying their names. I don't recall if I asked them specifically what their name was.
But you didn't provide us with their names prior to sitting on this stand today so we could ask them any questions, did you?
Well, I didn't get their addresses or any other location. I spoke with Kelly Bradshaw. I did everything I could.
And the name Sam James and the other name that you just said on the stand, that's nowhere in your report, right?
No, it's not. But Kelly Bradshaw's name is in my report. You can see that I spoke with her and took a detailed statement.
So one person.
One person.
In your 25 years experience, that one person was enough for you to figure out what happened at the scene.
The only one I could get to give a statement.
Officer McNulty, you said that you ultimately gave a citations and tickets to both William James and JT Sanborn, correct?
Yes, for disorderly conduct.
And you stated that when you got up on the scene, you only saw 2 people fighting, right?
Yes.
However, you also issued a ticket to JT Sanborn, right?
Yes.
Okay, and JT Sanborn would be the friend of Mr. James, correct?
Yes.
So you didn't even see him fighting, yet you thought it was okay to issue him a ticket.
Yes.
That's something you do often, right?
I assessed the situation and discovered that he had been involved in the altercation without coming to physical blows and wrote him a ticket.
So you just take people's words for things without investigating it to see if it really happened?
Well, if he admitted that he was involved in the fight, then sure.
Oh, so Mr. Sanborn told you that he was actively involved in this fight?
I don't remember exactly how everything went down with Mr. Sanborn, but I would have believed that's how I came about writing him the ticket.
You think?
I would believe so. It's been a while.
It's not in your report, so you have no idea, right?
It's not in my report, but there's a ticket if you want to go get it.
Well, you know, I really do want to go and get this ticket. Specifically, you're officer number 229, correct? That's your officer number?
I am officer number 229, yes.
Okay. And you stated that you issued Mr. Sanborn this ticket
Yes.
along with Mr. James?
Yes.
Your Honor, showing opposing counsel what's been marked as defense exhibits A and B.
Okay.
May I approach the witness?
You may.
Officer McNulty, I'm handing you states exhibits A and B. These are the citations we were just talking about, correct? They
Yes.
haven't been altered in any way, have they?
No, they have not.
Your Honor, at this time the defense seeks to enter defense exhibits A and B.
Any objection?
Yes, as to hearsay.
Response?
Your Honor, this officer just herself asked to see these tickets in order to talk about their and to discuss what is contained inside of them. Further, I'm not sure what the hearsay would be, as this officer is the person here testifying on stand. She's saying that she issued these tickets.
Your Honor, these are still out-of-court statements going to prove the truth of the matter asserted. They can't, as she can't ask her about these statements, the documents themselves are hearsay. And while the officer did ask to be refreshed with these documents, entering them into evidence would be improper.
I'm gonna overrule that. They can come in as defense exhibits. What numbers are they?
A and B.
A and B.
Specifically, I want to look at exhibit A first. That is the citation issued to JT Sanborn, correct?
Yes, it is.
And down in the bottom right-hand corner, there's an officer number, right?
Yes.
And what is that officer number?
That is 228. It's my supervising officer. Typically, I write his number and mine. It makes the paperwork a lot easier. On B, what you identified as B, the one for William James, I wrote 228/229. I guess in the hubbub, I forgot to write my own number.
So you just forgot to write down things that are important.
But I mean, I wrote my name. I spelled it out in like regular handwriting and then in cursive.
Okay. So you forgot to write down something important, just like you forgot to write down the names of the witnesses you talked to, right?
I wouldn't say it's
Objection,
important.
Your Honor, asked and answered.
Overruled.
It's helpful.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear what you said, Officer McNulty. You forgot to write down important names in your reports, correct?
I forgot to write down, I wrote down JT Sanborn's name, my name in 2 different areas. I forgot to write down my number. It's just helpful. It's not necessary.
I'm not specifically talking about the tickets, but the people you spoke to. You didn't write down their names.
No.
And you didn't write in your report that when you picked up the flashlight, put it in your pocket, that you then went and dropped it in evidence at the police station. You left that out too, didn't you?
Yeah, I left it out.
Okay, and in your 25 years experience, you thought it was appropriate to pick up the flashlight barehanded and put it in your pocket, right?
It was what I had been told was a weapon, so I picked it up. That's just protocol.
Officer McNulty, you said that when you got on the scene that it was for your safety, you saw it, the flashlight, you picked it up. This is before you even had spoken to anyone, right?
For protocol, anything that looks like a weapon, a huge mag light that's 30 inches long, could be used as a weapon. So I wasn't super afraid, but it's protocol. I picked it up, put it in my pants pocket.
And then forgot to report as to what happened to it later, right?
Yes.
And you never requested that it be fingerprinted?
No.
And you never requested that any blood swabs be taken off of the flashlight to see if Mr. James's blood was on it?
No, I didn't, but that sounds more like something like an analyst would do.
You're the lead investigator on this case, are you not?
Yes, I am.
And in order for an analyst to get swabs and to know what to do, they have to receive a report from you, do they not?
No.
So analysts just know magically what's going on in a case without ever having to talk to a lead investigating officer.
Yes.
No further questions.
Redirect.
Now, Officer McNulty, when you do these reports, you always list what you put into evidence, right?
Yes.
And you actually did list that you put the flashlight into evidence, right?
Yes, I did.
Opposing counsel asked you a lot about blood evidence that was on the scene.
Yeah.
Who did you see bleeding on the scene?
I saw William James bleeding profusely from several injuries to the head. One, a big gash that easily could have come from that mag light.
Did you see anyone else bleeding on that scene?
No.
But who had blood on their hands?
Pete Mitchell.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Witness may step down. Does the state have any further witnesses it wishes to call?
Yes, Your Honor, state calls William James.
Okay.
And Your Honor, I ask that I may place the evidence from the defense into
Certainly.